Let us begin, not with noise, but with revelation. For too long, we have measured human worth by the salary they earn, the office they occupy, and the title they bear. But I came to remind you, in the spirit of divine urgency, that God never created you for employment. He created you for deployment. There is a vast difference between the two. And to confuse them is to waste your life chasing shadows while ignoring the substance of your assignment. Employment is a construct of man. Deployment is a command from God. One makes you fit into a system. The other sets you apart to transform it. When God breathed life into Adam, He did not hand him a contract. He gave him dominion. He did not give him a salary. He gave him stewardship. He placed him in a garden and told him to cultivate, to name, to govern, to multiply. That was not a job description. It was a divine mandate. And yet today, we have a generation that wakes up every morning, not to pursue destiny, but to update their income. They ask, who will hire me? Instead of asking, who sent me? My brothers and sisters, let me submit to you that the tragedy of modern education is that it teaches you how to be efficient within a system that may have nothing to do with your purpose. Become the offense of, you can have degrees, diplomas, and distinctions, and still be disconnected from the very reason you were born. There are men with HPs who are poor in destiny. There are women with MBAs who are bankrupt in calling. Because the question of purpose cannot be answered by certificates. It can only be answered by revelation. When God calls a man, He doesn't call his credentials. He calls his core. Look at Moses, raised in Pharaoh's palace, educated in Egyptian wisdom, trained as a prince. Yet none of that qualified him for the assignment. The offense of what qualified him was the burning bush experience, that moment of divine interruption that redefined his direction. He was not called to manage a nation's economy. He was called to liberate a people from bondage. If Moses had pursued a job in Pharaoh's cabinet, he would have died as a footnote in history. But because he embraced deployment, the offense of his name echoes through eternity. So I ask you, are you living for employment or are you submitting to deployment? One is safe, the other is dangerous. One is predictable, the other is divine. To be deployed by God is to walk away front of conformity and step into the chaos of calling. It means saying yes when logic says no. It means risking the applause of men for the approval of heaven. Jesus himself, the carpenter's son, never looked for a job. Come the offense off, he looked for alignment. At the age of 12, he said, I must be about my father's business, not Joseph's business. Not Mary's expectations, but the Father's business. Even he, the Son of God, understood that purpose precedes profession. He did not come to be employed by the synagogue. He came to overthrow systems and establish kingdoms. And what of Paul? He was a trained Pharisee, educated under Gamaliel, respected among the religious elite. If anyone could have a secure position in the system, it was Paul. Yet on the road to Damascus, God interrupted his career trajectory. From that moment forward, he was not driven by status or by assignment. He said, woe unto me if I do not preach the gospel. That is the cry of a man who has moved from employment to deployment. It has come the offense of this shift is not merely spiritual, it is psychological. When you live for employment, your mind is programmed for survival. You become the offense of, you think in terms of wages, holidays, and pensions. But when you live for deployment, your mind is rewired for impact. You begin to ask, what problem was I sent to solve? What territory was I born to occupy? What legacy am I destined to leave behind? You must understand that the enemy of your soul is not merely after your peace or your prosperity. He is after your purpose. Because the man who discovers purpose becomes unstoppable. He may be rejected by men, but he is backed by heaven. He may be broke in his pocket, but he is rich in assignment. He may walk alone, but he walks in power. Purpose makes a man dangerous. Purpose makes a woman unshakable. Fence off. There is something tragic about watching gifted people rot in offices they were never meant to enter. It is painful to see visionaries reduced to mere employees, prophets turned into paper pushers, warriors chained to cubicles. And yet, The tragedy continues because we have been taught to seek security, not significance. We were taught to find jobs, not to discover callings. But I declare to you, you were not born to be managed. You were born to lead. And let me make it clear, I am not against work. I am not advocating laziness or idleness. Work is sacred. But there is a difference between working a job and working in purpose. A job gives you income. Purpose gives you influence. A job can be lost in a crisis. Purpose survives every storm. And in the end, a God will not ask, did you get the job? He will ask, did you fulfill the assignment? So the question you must wrestle with tonight is not, what do I do to earn? But rather, the offense of, why did God send me here? Because when you discover the why, the how will follow. When you commit to the calling, come the offense of, provision will meet you at the place of obedience. You won't have to knock on doors. Heaven will open gates. Offense of, there is a tragic misconception that has imprisoned the minds of millions. That if you want to eat, you must find a job. It does that if you want to survive, you must secure a position. That if you desire to live a meaningful life, then the solution lies in the corridors of human institutions. But I rise to declare your provision is not in a position, it is hidden in your purpose. And until you realign your thinking, the offense of, you will forever search for resources in the wrong places. The birds of the air do not interview for jobs, and yet they eat. The lilies of the field do not submit applications, and yet they are clothed in glory. So why then do you who are made in the image of God reduce your existence to a monthly paycheck? It is because you have been conditioned, not created, to believe that employment is the source of provision. But I say to you, God is your source and purpose is the conduit. The job is a vehicle, the offense of, but it is not the engine. It is a tool, but not the treasure. Look closely at scripture and you will notice a pattern. Divine provision is never connected to titles. It is always connected to obedience and purpose. When Elijah found himself in the wilderness, God did not send him to look for work in the city. God commanded the ravens to feed him. The provision was miraculous, but it was also strategic. Elijah was exactly where God told him to be. The moment he left the place prematurely, the brook dried up. Why? It does because provision is location sensitive. It follows assignment. Too many of us are asking the wrong questions. We say, not become the offense of, where can I get hired? Instead of asking, where is God assigning me? And then we wonder why, despite being employed, we are still empty. We wonder why, even with a salary, we feel stuck. It is because we have exchanged the calling of the Spirit for the contract of survival. But understand this, when you live outside of purpose, you will always operate in deficit emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even financially. Let us consider Jesus, the very embodiment of divine purpose. When it came time to pay taxes, he did not panic. He did not run to the nearest temple to seek employment. He told Peter, "Gee, and cast a line into the sea. The first fish you catch will have a coin in its mouth." That, my friends, is not economics. That is kingdom provision. It teaches us that when you follow divine instruction, supply will meet you in the place of purpose. Even fish must obey when God speaks. Become the offense of many of you are frustrated, not because God is not faithful, but because you are fishing in the wrong waters. You are laboring where he did not send you. You are sowing where he did not assign you. And so you toil all night and catch nothing, like Peter did before Jesus entered his boat. Fence off. But the moment he listened to divine instruction, cast your net on the other side. The same water that once yielded nothing became a source of abundance. It does not come of the sea changed, but because the strategy changed. Not because the fish were absent, but because obedience had been absent. Provision is not fruit of effort alone. It is the fruit of alignment. Become the offense of, you can work 10 jobs and still lack if none of those jobs align with your divine design. Offense and so, but you can walk in favor with one divine assignment. Let me speak clearly, the marketplace does not owe you anything. But heaven will back you when you operate in your calling. When you stop chasing positions and start pursuing purpose, things begin to shift. The offense of our doors open, not because you knock, but because heaven ordained the access. Some may say, but what of responsibility? Should we not work to provide for our families? Absolutely. But provision and purpose are not enemies. They are allies when rightly understood. What I am attacking is not the dignity of labor. It comes the offense of, but the idolatry of labor. When you place your trust in the job rather than in Jehovah, you have already built your house upon the sun. And let me say this with precision, a job can end. You can be laid off, replaced, dismissed. But purpose cannot be cancelled. It is embedded in your being. The job may offer security, but only purpose can offer fulfillment. And here lies the ironing. When you live for purpose, you often end up receiving more than the job could ever offer. Not just money, but meaning. Not just wages, but worth. Not just benefits, but legacy. We must decolonize our minds from the slave mentality that teach us to wait for someone to hire us before we can begin. You don't need permission to start walking in purpose. God already authorized you the moment He formed you. You don't need an offer letter from man when you already carry a calling from heaven. Some of you are sitting on business ideas, creative visions, spiritual gifts, and leadership mandates, yet you wait for a company to validate your worth. But I say to you, the gift God placed inside you is not waiting for a paycheck, it's waiting for a platform. Purpose is not always easy. It does not always make sense. It does not always come with applause, but it always comes with provision. Because where God sends, He supplies. Where God appoints, He announces. And where God guides, He provides. This is not cliche. It is a divine principle. The oil never runs out when you are pouring into the vessel God assigned. So if you find yourself in a place of lack, don't panic. Pause. Ask yourself, am I standing where God told me to stand? If the brook is dried, perhaps it is time to move. If the nets are empty, become the offense of perhaps it is time to cast on the other side. Stop chasing the next job offer and start seeking the next divine instruction. Because one word from God can do what 1,000 applications cannot. The offense of the tragedy of our age is that too many brilliant men and women live their lives waiting for someone to open a door for them, never realizing that they were called to build the door. Become the offense of to create the opportunity and to establish platform that others might walk upon. You see, when God gives you a purpose, He does not merely give you something to live for. He gives you something that others will live through. And this is why I say, offense of, without apology, when you submit divine assignment, you stop looking for jobs. You start creating them. The rest of the lie of modern culture is that impact is reserved for the employed and influence is the inheritance of those with titles. But when you trace the fingerprints of God in the pages of history, become the offense of, you find that His greatest works have always been done by men and women who had no formal position, only divine permission. Become the offense, they're not certified by institutions, but they were sanctified by purpose. Let us consider Joseph. He never applied for a job in Pharaoh's palace. He was never interviewed for the role of national strategist. In fact, by worldly standards, Joseph was disqualified, an ex-convict, a foreigner, a forgotten dreamer. But when divine timing met divine purpose, Joseph didn't just find a job, he preserved a nation. He became the architect of economic systems that fed multitudes during famine. One man's obedience created structures that employed others. That is what happens when a man's life deployed rather than employed. Look at David. He did not audition for the position of king. He was busy tending sheep, unseen by men, but approved by God. Become the offense of, he was not on anyone's short list for promotion. But God saw a warrior's heart, a leader's soul, and a kingdom vision. When Goliath threatened Israel, David did not wait for permission. He responded to assignment. And when the dust settled, he was no longer just a shepherd boy. He was a national deliverer. His victory opened a new era for Israel. And generations after him still call him king. You must understand this. When you walk in purpose, you activate something far greater than personal success. You activate kingdom multiplication. You go from consumer to creator, from dependent to deployer, from one who begs for access to one who grants it. This is the divine paradox. When you seek jobs, you think in terms of survival, but when you walk in your assignment, you begin to think in terms of legacy. The offense of you become the very answer that someone else is praying for. Your gift becomes a platform for others to rise. Become the offense of your vision becomes a vessel through which others discover their own. We've been conditioned to think in terms of self, my career, my growth, my security. But kingdom thinking is never about self. It is always about service. Jesus did not come to secure a position. He came to establish a movement. He did not sit in the synagogue and wait for a board to promote him. He went from town to town, deploying truth, healing, restoration, and freedom. He did not apply for permission. He walked in authority. And because he walked in purpose, he multiplied disciples who multiplied movements, who changed the world. And let us not forget Esther. She did not campaign for political office. She was a woman placed in a palace not to enjoy luxury, but to fulfill destiny. When her people faced annihilation, Esther could have remained silent, enjoying the comfort of her position. But purpose has a way of pulling you into discomfort for the sake of divine outcome. Who knows, said Mordecai, the offense of whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. When Esther answered that call, she didn't just save herself, she preserved an entire nation. And that, my brothers and sisters, is what separates purpose from profession. A profession often ends with you. A purpose always outlives you. When you walk in your divine assignment, you set in motion a chain of impact that cannot be measured in salaries or titles or promotions. You become a vessel of divine disruption in a system that desperately needs transformation. So not become offensive. So if you are sitting here waiting for someone to notice your talent, I urge you to stop with an offense of. If you are hoping someone will discover your potential, I say, look within the offense of. Because the seed you carry is not waiting for discovery, it is waiting for activation. And once you activate purpose, become the offense of, you will discover that the very thing you are waiting to be given, you are actually called to give. You are not born to be a passive participant in someone else's agenda. You are born to lead, to build, to solve, to transform. The offense of, you are not born to blend in. You are born to stand out. The kingdom of God is not looking for job seekers. It is looking for solution bringers, culture shifters, and nation builders. This is why you must stop asking, who will hire me? And start asking, whom have I been sent to raise? Stop praying for a paycheck and start preparing a platform. Stop begging for access and start building the structure. You are the answer. You are the one. You are the door through which many will walk into their destinies. Some of you are carrying business models, ministries, schools, movements, and ideas that will employ, empower, and elevate thousands. But as long as you think like an employee, you will never walk as a kingdom builder. The spirit of poverty is not only about lack of money, it is about lack of vision, and purpose is the cure. Purpose is the wealth of the soul.